Hey everybody, welcome to the Man Leek. I'm John as always, and we've made it. It's the final Phyrexia All Will Be One set review. Today we're going to be taking a look at all of the multicolored cards, artifact cards, and land cards. That does mean that this one will be a little bit longer. The multicolor cards tend to have a whole lot of words on them. There's just more cards. That said, some of the lands will be easy to go through pretty quick. But let's start out in multicolored with Phyrexia Grand Unifier. Phyrexia is 3 green, white, blue, black for legendary creature Phyrexian Angel at Mythic. She's a 7/7 with flying, vigilance, death touch, and lifelink. And when Phyrexia Grand Unifier enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each card type, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And of course, as we all know, the types are artifact, battle, creature, enchantment, instant land, planeswalker, and sorcery. All the card types that we are well aware of. So Phyrexia, we talk about this every set when there's some sort of ridiculous casting cost. It's just not something that I tend to go for unless there's incredible fixing in the set. And this set doesn't really seem to have incredible fixing. So enjoy your Phyrexas, everyone. First pick them if you want them. I'm not doing it. Maybe if drafts were free, but drafts ain't free. I gotta win those to keep paying for them. So I will never be drafting Phyrexia. Enjoy. On the battlefield, she of course is an incredible, stupid, nutso-bomb. Good luck getting her on the battlefield. Up next is Bladehold Warwhip. Bladehold Warwhip is 1 red-white for an artifact equipment at uncommon for Mirrodin. Equip abilities you activate of other equipment cost 1 less to activate. Equipped creature has double strike. So a 2/2 double strike for 3 mana is pretty dang good. This makes your other equipment a little bit cheaper. That said, as we've talked about this whole time, I'm a little bit worried about the equipment deck because you have to have enough equipment, and that's going to cut down on real creatures. Of course, a lot of the equipment comes in with a 2/2, but just a 2/2 is not actually that exciting. The re-equip cost on this is quite expensive, especially because it doesn't discount itself. That said, if the artifact deck is decent, you absolutely want to have this. So I'll start out picking it around kind of 4th, 5th range to see how this deck goes, but the deck might be bad, which means that the card's bad, but we'll see. Up next is Cephalopod Sentry. Cephalopod Sentry is 2 white-blue for an artifact creature Phyrexian Squid at uncommon. It's a star 5. It flies, and its power is equal to the number of artifacts you control, so it's a bare minimum of a 1/5. So here we have the thing that is supposed to make the blue-white deck work. The deck that I was a little bit hesitant on just because I wanted to know how many artifacts you can get. There are quite a number of blue artifact creatures, and white, of course, will supplement that with mites. So this can hopefully get pretty decent, and it flies, which means it might not have to do too many attacks to just end the game. It seems like a card that you should pick relatively highly in the 2nd, 3rd pick range, in the exception of if this deck turns out to be bad. I don't think it's going to be bad. I think there's just other decks that I would prefer, but still, you should probably take this and jump into that deck unless you are getting cut like crazy. Up next is Charforger. Charforger is 1 red-black for a creature Phyrexian Beast at uncommon. It's a 2/3. When Charforger enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 red Phyrexian Goblin creature token. Whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on Charforger. Remove 3 oil counters from Charforger. Exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. So again, we really want to be sacrificing stuff in the black-red deck, but there's not that many good sack outlets, and the payoffs are kind of weak. This one, for every 3 creatures that we sacrifice, we get to do the red version of draw a card, the temporary draw a card. It's a 3 mana 2/3 with a 1/1, so this card's not awful, but if this is the build-around for red-black, the red-black deck looks like trash. So I expect this to go quite late. I expect red-black to be a significantly worse deck than some of the other ones. I'm going to put this in kind of frankly, the 6th through 8th pick range. I just don't see this deck working. We're well into the uncommons, multicolors, and we're not seeing anything for red-black to really churn. Up next is Cinder Slash Ravager. Cinder Slash Ravager is 2 red-green for a creature Phyrexian warrior at uncommon. It's a 5/5. It costs 1 less to cast for each permanent you control with oil counters on it. It's got vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each creature your opponent controls. This is fine without the discount. But with the discount, this thing coming out on like 4 would be insane. This is obviously a pretty high pick. We're in kind of the high 4 or 5 pick, maybe the low 2, 3. You'll pick it pretty highly and take a gander at the red-green oil deck. This is this is 2023 Magic, I think. This card is pretty dang good. Obviously not a bomb, not just winning a game, but it's very, very efficiently costed for what it does. Up next is Azuri, Stalker of Spheres. Azuri is 2 green-blue for a legendary creature Phyrexian elf warrior at rare. It's a 3/3. When Azuri enters the battlefield, you may pay 3. If you do, proliferate twice. And whenever you proliferate, draw a card. 4 mana 3/3 that whenever we proliferate, draw a card is pretty decent, pretty fine. In the blue-green deck that is probably going to have quite a bit of proliferate, that's pretty dang good. If you can tack the 3 extra mana onto this, getting to immediately proliferate twice, which means everything that means plus draw 2 cards, is really good. This is a first pick, but it is, it's on the weaker end of the first pick range. This is not a bomb, it's just good value. Still a first pick, and I would look to get into green-blue if I have this. That said, I'm not getting married to Azuri like I might some crazy, gigantic answer it now or you're dead type of bomb. But first pick nonetheless. Up next is Glissa Sunslayer. Glissa is 1 black-green for a legendary creature Phyrexian zombie elf at rare. She's a 3/3. First strike, death touch. That's a combo. Whenever Glissa Sunslayer deals combat damage to a player, choose 1. You draw a card and you lose a life, destroy target enchantment, or remove up to 3 counters from target permanent. Glissa's just really good. A 3 mana 3/3 with First Strike Death Touch is already exceptionally good. First Strike Death Touch is terrifying because it kills everything other than a first striker, or a double striker, I guess. And of course, you can't even triple block it, because it still will deal 1 damage to 1 damage to the second blocker, 1 damage to the third blocker, and kill them all. You have to quad block it. This literally requires removal or else. And then once their creatures are dead from chumping this or whatever, I get to start drawing cards. I get to blow up any enchantments that they might have, probably not many, and or remove counters from their permanents. Glissa's great, an easy first pick. Again, not quite a bomb because it's going to take a while to win the game with her, but she is going to be an incredible threat. Up next is Jor-Kadeen, first Gold Warden. Jor-Kadeen is red-white for a legendary creature human rebel at rare. 2/2 trample. Whenever Jor-Kadeen attacks, it gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of equipped creatures you control. Then, if Jor-Kadeen's power is 4 or greater, draw a card. So 2/2 trample for 2 is fine, +X/+X. I'm in red-white, so I would be playing equipment. I would be playing those 4 Mirrodin equipment. Hopefully I have... This will be the big question, I guess. How many things will you have equipped? Hopefully I have 2 or 3-ish on average, which means Jor would get +2/+2 or +3/+3, which is pretty good for 2 mana. And if Jor is big, I get to draw a card, which I could do by perhaps equipping them with a piece of equipment. Seems okay. Again, I think it's going to really depend on how strong that red-white deck is. If it's strong, then you'll certainly first pick this. If it's not strong, then this probably goes a little bit lower in like the 4th, 5th pick range. We'll have to see how good that deck is. Up next is Kaito, Dancing Shadow. Kaito is 2 blue-black for a legendary planeswalker Kaito at rare with a book as a static ability. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you may return 1 of them to its owner's hand. If you do, you may activate loyalty abilities of Kaito twice this turn rather than only once. Kaito starts at 3 loyalty. His +1 is up to 1 target creature can't attack or block until your next turn. 0, draw a card. -2, create a 2/2 colorless drone artifact creature token with Death Touch, and when this creature leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Hey everybody, look, it's the normal Planeswalker layout. It draws a card, it defends itself. It doesn't win the game, I guess. The ultimate's not there's no ult, really. The -2 is certainly not what I would call an ult. As with most Planeswalkers, we're going to discuss this, but it's obviously a first pick. Kaito is pretty in what I would consider to be the rare range of Planeswalker. I still would prefer they just simply don't exist, but drawing a card's not that big of a deal. Momentarily arresting a creature isn't that big of a deal, or I guess pacifying if you want to get technical. And making a 2/2 Death Touch is not that big of a deal. The static ability is kind of cool if you do have something with evasion that you're, okay returning to your hand. Don't just do that, automatically. Make sure you think about it. If you can just kill them next turn or in a couple of turns, if it's much more of a better race, just don't bounce the creature, because none of these abilities triggering twice is going to be that big of a deal. But still, Kaito, first pick, fine, rare Planeswalker. For this set anyways, I'm okay with it. Up next is Kaya, Intangible Slayer. Kaya is 3 white, black, black. For a legendary Planeswalker, Kaya at rare, she starts with 6 loyalty and has hexproof, of course. Why wouldn't she? +2, each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. That's Oath of Kaya. 0, you draw 2 cards, then each opponent may scry 1. -3, exile target creature or enchantment. If it wasn't an aura, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 1/1 white spirit creature with flying in addition to its other types. So, what? -3, you get to kill something, and as long as it wasn't an aura specifically, you get a 1/1 copy of it. Kaya is a very powerful, very good Planeswalker. On the battlefield, you have to be able to cast her. That means that you need to be living to the late game. 3 white, black, black is most certainly a late game casting cost. But if you get her down and she's protected, that's another slight knock here. She doesn't protect herself other than, I guess you could define the -3 as protecting herself. Actually, yeah, it makes a 1/1. She protects herself. She's just good. Easy first pick. But again, there are going to be situations. There are going to be some situations where you are white-black at the end of the draft, and you maybe still shouldn't play her. Those are situations where your curve should top out at 4, for example. Those are examples where your deck wants to win the game by turn 5. But as long as that is not the case, you should probably be playing her and first picking her. She's fantastic. Just make sure you can get her down. Up next is Kethek, Crucible Goliath. Kethek is 2 black-red for a legendary creature Phyrexian Beast at rare. It's a 4/4. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary creature card with lesser mana value. Put it onto the battlefield, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. 4 mana, 4/4. Cool. The ability is a May. So right there, right then, right there, this is fine as like a high 6th through 8th pick. And then if it's beneficial for us to sacrifice the creature, we can. I don't know. Again, this red-black sack deck, sacrificing something at the beginning of my end step is not really where I want to be doing it, and only once. And I roll the dice and hope that I hit something decent, but that is definitely a lesser mana value. I don't know. It's again, fine for just the base stats if you ignore the text box, and you can ignore the text box. And then in situations where it's relevant, sacrificing something that's been pacified or arrested is great. So that's all upside. So, I'll push this up into the 4th, 5th pick range, but I just don't see enough here to open a Kethek and go, oh man, I won the draft. I'm first picking it. There's just not enough going on for it. So I'm going to 4th, 5th pick Kethek, which means I probably won't see it for weeks and weeks and weeks until the format settles down and people stop rare drafting. So until then, let me know how it goes, because I won't be picking it high enough. Up next is Luca, Bound to Ruin. Luca is 2 red Phyrexian Gruul green. For a legendary Planeswalker, Luca at Mythic, he starts with 5 loyalty or 3 if you pay 2 life for that 1 mana symbol. +1, add red-green. Spend this mana to only cast a creature spell or activate abilities of creatures. -1, create a 3/3 green Phyrexian beast creature token with Toxic 1. -4, Luca deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control as you activated this ability. That's a whole lot of text, but this is a 5 mana, 5 loyalty planeswalker that will give you a discount on the first turn that you cast him if you can use that +1 and use that 2 mana. Defends himself really well with a 3/3 for -1. That means even if you pay life on this, you've got 3 3/3s and a dead Luca if you're cool with that, and you might just be cool with that. And of course, if you can get Luca a little bit higher, you could potentially build your own Wrath depending on the power on your board. Luca looks great. Again, a snap first pick. All these planeswalkers are first pick. They vary in power level a bit, but they're all first pick. Up next is Malcator, Purity Overseer. Malcator is 1 white-blue for a legendary creature Phyrexian Elephant Wizard at rare. It's a 1/1 for 3. When it ETBs, you make a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token. At the beginning of your end step, if 3 or more artifacts enter the battlefield under your control this turn, create a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token. Man, I wonder if at some point they'll have a way to shorten that phrase even more. They did that with create, right? But I feel like more shortening needs to be done. Malcator seems pretty good. It is a 3 mana, 3/3, and a 1/1 tags along. I would prefer to look at it that way because the 1/1's not really going to be doing much. Getting 3 or more artifacts to enter the battlefield on a turn, I don't know how much I'm going to be doing that. Is there one card that makes 2 mites, I think? I definitely need to have this with the Might Hive that's making a mite every turn, and even then I probably need to double spell on top of it. This feels a little bit more commandery to me. I doubt that this is going to be something that you can do more than like once. That said, doing it once is fine, and doing it never still makes this card fine. It's just a little bit more in kind of the 4th, 5th pick range for me. If it turns out that, yeah, you can snap your fingers and make 3 artifacts whenever you want, then wow, have I misread a lot of cards in this set, apparently. And in that case, you will pick this higher. But I'm going to start out picking this 4th, 5th, way lower than I'll need to actually get to play it. Up next is Melira, the Living Cure. Melira is green-white for a legendary creature Human Scout at rare. She's a 3/3. If you would get 1 or more poison counters, instead you get 1 poison counter, and you can't get an additional poison counter this turn. Exile Melira, the Living Cure. Choose another target creature or artifact. When it's put into a graveyard this turn, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So, first off, this is a 3/3 for 2. That's good. That's good. That makes this kind of a bare minimum. High 6th through 8th pick, low 4th, 5th. The first ability is going to be relevant a decent bit. There will be matchups where it's just flavor text, but it'll be, somewhat reasonable. And then the second one is a little bit more interesting. The fact that any of my opponent's removal that doesn't exile, I kind of get 1 chance to say no. Is cool. That said, be aware this is on board. If your opponent is in any way, shape, or form intelligent, they know what's going to happen. They're not just going to spend great removal on a creature that you can just say, it didn't happen. So as always, don't get too pie in the sky on that. That said, Melira seems quite good. I'm going to push her up into the 2nd, 3rd pick range to start. She's not a bomb. I think I'll still take 1 color on conditional removal over her, but she seems decent. Again, she's a 3/3 for 2. That's already really good. Up next is Miglos, Maze Crusher. Miglos is 1 red-green for a legendary creature Phyrexian Beast at rare. It's a 4/4. It enters the battlefield with 5 oil counters on it. Pay 1 and remove an oil counter from Miglos. It gains Vigilance and Menace until end of turn. Pay 2 and remove 2. It gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Pay 3 and remove 3. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. First off, 4/4 for 3. Really good. 4/4 for 3 with Vigilance Menace 5 times. Really good. Might just end the game. 4/4 for 3 that can become a 6/6 twice. and one of those times could be Vigilance Menace, really good. The third effect is much more narrow, but very cool when it's the correct decision to make. This is a first pick. It's powerful all around, not quite bomb territory. This is a great example of why I'm so glad I don't have letter grades. The correct answer here is first pick. It doesn't matter if it's an A or an A- or a B+. Those grades don't matter. First pick. Up next is Nahiri the Unforgiving. Nahiri is 1 red Boros Phyrexian white legendary planeswalker Nahiri at Mythic. She starts with 5 loyalty or 3 if you pay 2 life for the Phyrexian mana. +1 until your next turn. Up to 1 target creature attacks a player each combat if able. +1, discard a card, then draw a card. 0, exile target creature or equipment card with mana value less than Nahiri's loyalty from your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of it. That token gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Here we have another Mythic Planeswalker that should probably be rare from a power level perspective. I honestly hate when they do this, when they slave themselves to a flavor reason for mechanical decisions, even when it makes way more sense from game design to not do that. As a slight tangent, a very good example was in my favorite set of all time, Eldraine, where Sir Conrad was an uncommon because all the knights were uncommon, but Sir Conrad was so stupidly powerful there was no reason that he shouldn't have been a rare, but they were stuck on this flavor decision over game design. Give me game design any day. Anyways, again, we're in the situation of Nahiri's a first pick. +1 to force an opponent's creature that shouldn't attack me to attack me is great. Or potentially just +1 a creature that I'm going to attack with anyways. Also, it's up to, so I could just +1 and pick nothing. +1 to rummage, always handy. And being able to bring back a creature for 1 turn, before it goes away forever, can be handy, can be literally unusable if there's no targets. So yeah, first pick, definitely should have been a rare, not a mythic. Wanderer, definitely should have been a mythic. Up next is Necrogen Rot Priest. Necrogen Rot Priest is 2 black-green for a creature Phyrexian zombie cleric at uncommon. It's a 1/5 with Toxic 2. Whenever a creature you control with Toxic deals combat damage to a player, that player gets an additional poison counter. Pay 1 black-green. Target creature you control with Toxic gains Death Touch until end of turn. Now, do note with this that this will trigger multiple time for multiple toxic creatures because of the way that it's worded. So if you hit with 3 toxic creatures, you'll get 3 triggers of this, even though all of those toxic poison counters are done in 1 lump. But yeah, this is obviously your black-green kill 'em with poison lord. It's a little bit weird that it has toxic too. Obviously, it wants to have toxic so that it can target itself with the ability, because a 1/5 death touch on command is going to be very good. That said, I'm never going to be attacking with my 1/5 unless, it's somehow winning me the game or my opponent is so far behind they have no board. But still, this is a card that you're definitely going to want in your black-green deck. You're going to pick it a little bit highly, maybe push your way in that direction. It's up, I think, in the I want to say second, third pick range, but it's really build around. Like, it doesn't do that much if you're not overly toxic. So maybe it's like the high fourth, fifth pick range, low second, third pick. Up next is Okiva or Ovika, Enigma Goliath. Ovika is 5 blue-red for legendary creature Phyrexian Nightmare at rare. It's a 6/6 flying, ward 3, pay 3 life. This is the first time we've ever seen 2 things that need to be done for ward. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create X 1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens where X is the mana value of that spell. They gain haste until end of turn. Everything about this looks amazing except that 7 mana cost. We are not in green. This is not a treasure format. I'm a little uncertain how I'm comfortably getting to 7 in my blue-red deck. I absolutely hope that I can, because this card looks great. A, it's a 6/6 flyer with a whole lot of ward on it. B, all of my non-creature spells are also a whole bunch of goblins. So I'm gonna first pick this to start and see if I can figure out how to make sure I get to 7. I just worry that as the format evolves, we're gonna discover that 7 drops are not a thing outside of green ramp. So let's hope it's a first pick. We'll see how it ends up. Up next is Rhea Evor, Bane of Bladehold. Rhea is 2 white-black for a legendary creature Phyrexian Knight at rare. She's a 3/4 with Battle Cry. The first and only time we'll see Battle Cry. Battle Cry is whenever this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. At the beginning of combat on your turn, the next time target creature would deal combat damage to one or more players this combat, prevent that damage. If damage is prevented this way, create that many 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature tokens. Okay, so she's a 3/4 for 4 with Battle Cry. That's fine. We'll play that, especially if we want to be going wide. I cannot envision the situation in which I want to prevent damage from the creature that I attacked with to my opponent in order to make some 1/1s. I mean, I can envision it, but it requires very specific cards and very specific board states. I can't consistently envision how I would ever want to do that. Furthermore, you have to make that decision at the beginning of your combat. So you actually pick the creature long before blocks or any sort of interaction happens. So your opponent, assuming they have blockers, actually gets to determine whether or not you're going to make those mites in the first place because they can just block the creature you pick. So, I don't know. It's a 3/4 for 4 with Battle Cry. That's a pretty high pick. That's in the second, third pick range for me. I just don't understand this block of text. It feels like it's something that I'm supposed to do in some sort of four-player commander stuff that I'm never going to play. Up next is Serum Core Chimera. Serum Core Chimera is 2 blue-red for a creature Phyrexian Chimera at uncommon. It's a 2/4 flyer. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it, remove 3 oil counters, draw a card. Then you may discard a non-land card. When you discard a card this way, Serum Core Chimera deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Activate only as a sorcery. This looks really good. This is going to be some real good payoff for your blue-red spells deck. It's a 2/4 flyer that's going to do some damage and or block flyers that they happen to have. You're going to be casting non-creature spells in your blue-red spells deck. You're going to be proliferating from especially the blue in your blue-red spells deck. That's going to get you those 3 oil counters, which is going to let you start drawing cards each time you take 3 off. Note as well, this is not looting. You don't have to discard a non-land card. You may. So when it's correct, you can just lightning bolt a creature for whatever card you're not going to use. And if it's not correct, just don't discard. This card looks really good. I'm going to pick it quite highly in the second, third pick range because I want to be in blue-red. Up next is Slaughter Singer. Slaughter Singer is green-white for a creature Phyrexian Cleric at uncommon. It's a 2/2 with Toxic 2. Whenever another creature you control with Toxic attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This looks very good, very efficient. 2 mana 2/2 Toxic 2. Your opponent better not stumble. If they do, they are dead in a very short order. And of course, your other toxic creatures will get bigger. Those mites suddenly look better when they're 2/2s. Toxic 1 that can't block. You're going to pick this decently highly. I would say in the low second, third pick range. You need a little bit more to go on with this. You need to have your opponent stumble, which is not something you can guarantee. It's still a good card. Low second, third pick is obviously nowhere near a bad card. It's just not something that I'm probably going to first pick. Up next is an octopus swimming underwater. Tainted Observer. Tainted Observer is 1 green-blue for a creature Phyrexian Octopus at uncommon. It's a 2/3 that doesn't have flying. Toxic 1. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2. If you do, proliferate. This card's obviously great. 2/3 not flyer for 3 with Toxic 1. That's going to do a bunch of poison damage. That's going to do a bunch of real damage. It can block a lot of the X or the 2X flyers, and all of the rest of your creatures you can tax 2 in order to proliferate even more, which is what green-blue wants to be doing. Pretty high pick, definitely in the second, third pick range. Looks real good. That octopus is certainly not flying. Up next is Tyvar, Jubilant Brawler. Tyvar is 1 black-green for a legendary planeswalker Tyvar at rare. It starts with 3 loyalty. You may activate abilities of creatures as you control as though those creatures had haste. That's not that impactful. I don't think you attempt to build around it when the opportunity comes up. Cool, but it's not a common thing. +1, untap up to 1 target creature. That's cool. That's amazing on your mana dork. That's great to give things pseudo-vigilance. Love it. -2, mill 3 cards. Then you may return a creature card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. I guess, but meh. Tyvar looks like a rare planeswalker that I'm very happy to be a rare planeswalker. In fact, don't tell anybody, but Tyvar looks like an uncommon planeswalker. This is definitely the absolute weakest of all of them. It's still a lot of value, as planeswalkers always are, so I think you still first pick Tyvar, but this one is very, very, very weak in comparison. I don't know that I'm ever going to do the -2. It's honestly a good bit of risk in order to get myself a 2-drop. And the +1's not that impactful, and the static ability is also not that impactful. In fact, honestly, on rereading this, I don't even think we can say first pick on Tyvar. I think we have to say second, third pick. There's a lot of stuff that I think I would just prefer to pick over him. He is very weak. Up next is Venser, Corpse Puppet. Hey everybody, Venser's back. Venser is blue-black for a legendary creature Phyrexian zombie wizard, somehow not a horror. At rare, it's a 1/3 with lifelink toxic 1. Whenever you proliferate, choose 1. If you don't control a creature named the Hollow Sentinel, create the Hollow Sentinel, a legendary 3/3 colorless Phyrexian golem artifact creature token. Or, target artifact creature you control gains flying and lifelink until end of turn. 2 mana, 1/3 lifelink toxic 1. Sure, I guess. Toxic 1's a little bit weird on a 1/3 with no evasion, but whatever. And then when we proliferate, which we'll certainly be doing in blue, and I believe we can do in black. Checking, yes, we certainly do it in black. You get yourself that 3/3. And then every time after, as long as you have that 3/3 flies and lifelinks. That's very good. Venser looks like a decent first pick. Not super powerful. There's some stuff you got to do with this to get it going. But it's one of those nice rares where it's got some power behind it, but nobody's going to want to remove it. But you're going to have to. And then you're just going to die to the common 4/4 or something. But yeah, I'll first pick Venser, Corpse Puppet. Up next is Vivisection Evangelist. Vivisection Evangelist is 3 white-black for a creature Phyrexian Cleric at uncommon. It's a 4/4 with Vigilance. Corrupted, when it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. This looks really good. Really good. 5 mana, 4/4 Vigilance. Probably just about correctly costed. There could be an argument that it could cost 1 less, maybe. And if you have Corrupted on, by turn 5, or, top deck this a little bit later, just having a kill spell attached to it, really good. Vivisection Evangelist looks like a very strong second, third pick, and a reason to go into white-black. The final gold card, remember we still have artifacts and lands to do, is Voidwing Hybrid. Voidwing Hybrid is blue-black for a creature Phyrexian Bat at uncommon. It's a 2/1 flyer with Toxic 1. When you proliferate, return Voidwing Hybrid from your graveyard to your hand. This looks really good too. 2 mana, 2/1 flyer. I love those stats. A little bit harder when it's blue-black. You're not always going to be able to do this on turn 2, but hopefully you will be able to. Toxic 1 is going to get that poison going, whether or not you're winning with it or just getting things corrupted. And when you proliferate, which you're going to be doing in blue-black, the fact that if your opponent dealt with this, they're going to have to deal with it again and again and again is really good. This looks like, honestly, a pretty strong second, third pick. There's a chance that it's a very, very, very high 4th, 5th, but I like second, third. It looks really good, and I will want as many of these as possible in blue-black. All right, as expected, the gold cards definitely are, the boring bog standard of here is what this color pair is supposed to / allowed to do. And surprise, in general, you want those cards if you're playing those colors. Anyways, that rant is for a different video or podcast or something. On to the artifacts, we have Argentum Masticore. Argentum Masticore is 5 mana for a 5/5 artifact creature Phyrexian Masticore at rare. It's got first strike and protection from Multicolored. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice it unless you discard a card. When you discard a card this way, destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to the mana value of the discarded card. 5 mana 5/5 first strike is definitely going to be a problem to deal with. That said, you kind of have to stop playing number of your cards, and eventually you just have to stop playing cards so that you do have something to discard. Luckily, you are hopefully killing things with those things that you're discarding, allowing your 5/5 first strike to get in even more. This looks like a first pick to me, I believe. There's the slight downside that it might not be the greatest top deck when you're out of cards in your hand, because you won't be able to play it that turn. You'll need to wait a turn to be able to play it, which may not get you back in. That said, I'm going to start first picking it, especially nice that it just goes in basically every deck. Up next is Atrax's Skitterfang. Atrax's Skitterfang is 3 generic mana for an artifact creature Phyrexian Insect at uncommon. It's a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield with 3 oil counters on it. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may remove an oil counter from Atrax's Skitterfang. When you do, target creature you control gains your choice of flying, vigilance, death touch, or lifelink until end of turn. Skitterfang looks really good. 2/2 for 3, a little bit overcosted. But if you want to, and that's a huge thing here, that it's a may, you can take one of those oil counters off to give probably flying, or to give something bigger flying. Flying is going to be the real big one here. This is going to make things very, very dangerous for your opponent because you're just going to start flying over them and it's going to hurt. You've got at least 3 flyovers, and if you're proliferating at all, even more. This looks like another high-ish pick. I'm going to put it probably in the high 4th, 5th pick range, maybe the low 2nd, 3rd. It goes in most decks, I would say. Maybe if you're not planning on being super proactive, it's not quite as high of a pick, but I think this format's not going to allow that much. So let's go with a low 2nd, 3rd pick. Up next is Basilica Skullbomb. Basilica Skullbomb is 1 mana for an artifact at common. You can pay 1 sack it to draw a card. All 5 Skullbombs have that same effect. This Skullbomb, for 2 and a white and sacrifice it, you can give target creature you control +2/+2 and flying until end of turn, draw a card, activate only as a sorcery. This looks like a pretty decent Skullbomb. Being able to just cycle it if need be is nice to have, but you would much prefer that you're actually activating it for the 2 and a white. This reminds me of, I believe, a 2 and a white sorcery from Hour of Devastation that made a zombie get +2/+2 and fly. It ends games. Just being able to slap something with +2/+2 and throw them in the air, just like Skitterfang, is going to deal a whole bunch of damage, and you still get to draw that card. Basilica Skullbomb looks like a card that I'll happily include in a lot of my white decks. If I'm not playing white, I don't really see a reason to play an off-color Skullbomb, though. That said, you're picking these kind of late in like the 6th through 8th pick range. I think you can get them if you want them. You do have to spend a slightly real pick, but not an overly real pick. Up next is Dross Skullbomb. Again, 1 mana artifact common, pay 1 sack, draw a card. For 2 and a black, sack it. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand and draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery. Again, I think this is a fine one to play in black. This effect is always slightly nice to have. I do prefer the effect on a land so that I'm not spending a real card on playing this, but I don't think I'm going to feel too bad putting this into my decks. I don't think this one's always going to make my deck, whereas I do think the white one will almost always make my deck, I think. So this one's slightly lower. Again, still in the 6th through 8th pick range. But again, I'm not spending a real deck, but it'll be nice to have. Up next is Dune Mover. Dune Mover is 2 mana for an artifact creature Phyrexian Golem at common. It's a 2/1 with Toxic 1. When Dune Mover enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, then shuffle, and put that card on top. This is really, really, really slow. This is nowhere near Skittering Surveyor, which was great. That put the land directly into your hand. This one gives it to you a full turn later and also means that you're just drawing a land next turn. That's significantly worse. I'm not going to look to play this unless I'm splashing. If I'm splashing, I'll be kind of okay, but I would prefer to just be green and splashing with that 1 mana spell that lets me go and just get the land. So yeah, this is a low pick. I think you can just grab this on the wheel. If you want one, I think you can get one, and I don't think you really play this as long as you have better cards. Up next is the Filigree Silex. The Filigree Silex is 2 mana for a legendary artifact at rare. Tap to put an oil counter on it. Tap and sack it, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value equal to the number of oil counters on it. Tap, remove 10 oil counters from among permanents you control, and sacrifice the Filigree Silex. It deals 10 damage to any target. We saw this get activated for that final ability at the PPR multiple times, and it was terrible. It was actively awful. If you're getting 10 oil counters on your cards, you're probably not attacking your opponent. You're probably sitting there, playing O3s and proliferating and just kind of playing with yourself, which means that they're at 20 or more, maybe, and dealing 10 does literally nothing. So I don't think you should any way, shape, or form ever even attempt to do the 30 ability of this card. That said, the rest of this card is just Ratchet Bomb, which is good. So you should still pick this relatively highly, up in probably just the first pick range, because you can put it in any deck, and just ratchet this up to, probably 3 or 4, depending on what's going on your board, what's going on your opponent's board, what's going on in your hand. When the time is correct that, you need a little bit of a reset, boop, reset the board, follow up with whatever, good creature you've got, and things are great. So pick this pretty highly. Just take a Sharpie and scratch out that third ability. You should never be trying to do that. Asterisk, because people will get mad. Yes, if your opponent's at 10 life, go for it. But you're not a child. I don't think I have to tell you that in that case you should do it. Up next is Furnace Skullbomb. Furnace Skullbomb is 1 mana for an artifact at common. Pay 1, sacrifice it, draw a card. Pay 1 and a red, not 2 and a red. Sacrifice it. Put 2 oil counters on target artifact or creature you control. Draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery. This one I also think is a little bit less good than the white one, but I will still play this in probably some number of my red decks. Certainly my red-green and my red-blue, because they seem to very much care about oil. And getting to draw a card is kind of cool. A little bit similar to the black one. If I just have better cards, you probably can't convince me to put this into my deck. But if I have a spot, I'll pop it in. I'll put this in the 6th through 8th pick range. I don't think you need to spend super real picks on it. Up next is Graz, Unstoppable Juggernaut. 8 mana for a legendary artifact creature, Juggernaut at rare. It's a 7/5. Juggernauts you control attack each combat if able. Juggernauts you control can't be blocked by walls. Other creatures you control have base power and toughness 5/3 and are Juggernauts, in addition to their other creature types. This is another case of, I don't know if you can just casually get to that mana cost. And if you do, is 5/3 upgrading your creatures? One interesting thing to note is they don't lose their abilities. So if they have flying, they're 5/3 flyers. If they have vigilance, they're 5/3 vigilance, trample, etc. Do note that these things don't get trample, which is why I'm a little bit concerned. Any sort of X4 or higher, you are actually downgrading. That said, I have a feeling that if everything you have becomes a 5/3 in addition to its other types and abilities, plus this 7/5, you're probably in a pretty good spot. I suspect this is secretly a green card. You can only play this if you're going to be ramping. The casting cost for me, unfortunately, is just too high that I'm probably going to ignore it and start out not picking it. I don't quite know that F is the right grade, but I'm not going to pick this to start, and we'll see how the format evolves. I will leave that up to other people. On the battlefield, probably pretty good. We'll see if it can make it to the battlefield. Up next is Ickerplate Golem. Ickerplate Golem is 3 mana for an artifact creature, Phyrexian Golem uncommon. It's a 2/3. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it has 1 or more oil counters on it, put an oil counter on it. Creatures you control with oil counters on them get +1/+1. This is sort of your oil lord, as it were, which does mean that this is probably a secret red-green, red-blue, blue-red kind of card. You're probably not playing this in your black or white decks. but I'll pick this pretty highly and try to get in there, kind of like I would pick, a Chief of the Foundry or whatever and try to get into the artifact deck. So I'll put this in the second, third pick range. You just have to know when to abandon it because you're not ending up in the right colors. Up next is Maze Skull Bomb, 1 mana artifact common, pay 1 sack, draw a card. Pay 2 and a green sack. Target creature you control gets +3/+3 and gains trample until end of turn, draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery. I don't like this one quite as much as the white. Flying is just so frequently unblockable, whereas trample and +3/+3 may still just be, eat a creature. Maybe deal a bit of extra damage, especially at sorcery speed where it's not coming as a surprise. That said, I will not feel bad including these into my green decks. I don't know if they will automatically make their way in. I think this one probably is slightly better than the red and black, but slightly worse than the white. So same place, 6th through 8th pick, not a real pick, but fine. Up next is Mirran Safehouse. Mirran Safehouse is 3 mana for an artifact at rare. As long as Mirran Safehouse is on the battlefield, it has all activated abilities of all land cards in all graveyards. That's an F. Your lands are probably not going to make it into the graveyard all that well. There's no explicit self-mill in the set, really. The abilities are just going to be tap for a green or tap for a white. So this is just not for limited. This shouldn't be in these packs. There's set boosters and commander decks and collector's boosters and yada yada for this crud. Get it out of my draft set. Up next is Monument to Perfection. Monument to Perfection is 2 mana for an artifact at rare. Pay 3, tap, search your library for a basic sphere or locust land card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle. There are 9 spheres in the set. There are 0 locusts. Pay 3, Monument to Perfection becomes a 9/9 Phyrexian construct artifact creature, loses all abilities, and gains indestructible and toxic 9. That sounds amazing. Activate only if there are 9 or more lands with different names among the basic sphere and locust lands that you control. Once again, there's set boosters and collector's boosters and commander precons and etc. for this crud. You are not going to get 9 differently named basic and sphere lands. Some of the spheres are common. Many of them are rare. And you're probably playing 2 colors. So this card is yet another F. I'm not playing this just for the first ability, and you are never going to do the second ability. Usually I will say, let me know if you manage to pull it off in limited. I will tell you right now, you are never doing the second ability. Ever. Never, ever, ever. So yet another F. Up next is Mere Convert. Mere Convert is 2 mana for an artifact creature Phyrexian Mirror at uncommon. It's a 2/1 with Toxic 1. Tap, pay 2 life. Add 1 mana of any color. 2/1 for 2. 2/1 for 2. We've got a Piker here with Toxic 1. That is a fine enough include in a deck if you need a filler creature. Being able to tap and pay 2 life to get the color that you're really struggling for, whether you're splashing or whether you're off a color, is fine, but that's not something you just want to casually do over and over. That will add up. All in all, this is a fine include. It's in kind of the 4th, 5th pick range. I'll put it in most decks, but I'm not going, I'm not 1st, 2nd, 3rd picking this ever, probably not 4th picking it either. But it will help you splash a little bit. It'll help you, fix your curve a little bit, maybe. It'll help you ramp a little bit, maybe. You're just not going to use this quite like a mana dork because it's going to add up real quick. Up next is Mere Custodian. Mere Custodian is 3 mana for an artifact creature Mirror at common. It's a 2/3. When it ETBs, scry 2, then each opponent may scry 1. Not a big fan of this either. I don't think I'm going to need to be playing a somewhat vanilla 2/3 for 3, and scrying 2 is not going to make me want to do that, and giving my opponent a scry 1 is not going to make me want to do that. This looks like extreme filler. You ideally never play it. It is deep, 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 deep into the wheel. Play it and feel sad if you desperately need a creature. Up next is Mere Kinsmith. Mere Kinsmith is 4 mana for an artifact creature Mirror at common. It's a 3/1. When it ETBs, you may search your library for a Mirror card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle. Fun fact, there's no more Mirror. We've seen all 3 of them. I don't want to go and get another copy of this. I don't want to get a copy of Mere Custodian because it's not in my deck anyways. And I guess I'm okay getting a Mere Convert, but on turn 4 or later, not really. So Mere Kinsmith also looks like absolute garbage. I don't want to play this either. Certainly not playing a 4 mana 3/1. So I do think this one is actually much closer to an F than Mere Custodian is. Up next is Phyrexian Atlas. Phyrexian Atlas is 3 mana for an artifact at common. Tap, add 1 mana of any color, so it's a manalith. Corrupted, whenever it becomes tapped, each opponent loses a life. So if you need to splash, Manalith is always an option for you, and here it is. And if you are playing one of those corrupted decks, the fact that this turns into a pinger means that it's actually got a lot of value towards the late game beyond just being a land that you don't need anymore. So if you're splashing, you can pick this up. If you are not splashing, I might include this if I'm in a corrupted heavy deck, but it would probably be first on my chopping block. If I'm not looking for corrupted, then I'm probably not playing it. Up next is Prophetic Prism. Prophetic Prism is 2 mana for an artifact at common. When it ETBs, draw a card, pay 1 tap, add 1 mana of any color. I always love Prophetic Prism. I always love splashing with Prophetic Prism. 2 mana and it replaces itself is very nice. Yes, it's a filter land, meaning you have to pay 1 to turn it into something, but it's also not one of your lands, so it's not quite hurting you that much. Prophetic Prism is always decent if you're splashing. If you're not splashing, you probably don't play it, but if you are, you want one. So spend a reasonable pick on it in the 6th through 8th range if you need it. Probably in pack 2 or pack 3. Certainly not in pack 1. You can pass these quite late in pack 1. Up next is Prosthetic Injector. Prosthetic Injector is hard to say. It's a 1 mana artifact equipment at uncommon. Equipped creature gets +0/+2 and has Toxic 1 equipped for 1. Very low cost, very low equip cost, but +0/+2 is just not something I want. I'd never care about butt equipment. Also, why does this weird stabby gauntlet affect my butt? Surely all those stabby things would let me stab more. Anyways, I'm never playing this. This looks like virtually an F if I'm in the red-white equipment deck. Because it's so cheap, I'll probably play it. But that's literally the only place. So F unless you're in red-white. Up next is Ribskiff. Ribskiff is 4 mana for an artifact vehicle at uncommon. It's a 4/4 with Toxic 2 when it ETBs, draw a card, and Crew 3. Crew 3 is killer. If it's Crew 3, I need to be winning the game with it, essentially. And a generic 4/4 Toxic 2 is not winning the game. Certainly not for 4 mana, and I get to draw a card when I play it. Meh. This seems really bad to me. I'm putting it at an F. You will probably never see me put this in a deck. Up next is Soulless Jailer. Soulless Jailer is 2 mana for an artifact creature Phyrexian Golem at rare. It's an 0/4. Permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield. Players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or exile. There is very little of that happening in this set. This is another F. If it happens to find its way into your pool, you can side it in the extraordinarily rare situation that it comes up. But that is so rare that I'm comfortable just saying F, do not pick it. It's an 0/4 for 2. Don't play an 0/4 for 2. Up next is Staff of Completion. Staff of Completion is 3 mana for an artifact at Mythic. Tap and pay a life. Destroy target permanent you own. No. Tap, pay 2 life. Add 1 mana of any color. No. Tap, pay 3 life. Proliferate. Probably not. Tap, pay 4 life. Draw a card. No. Pay 5, untap it. No. This is an F. Obviously, they're trying to play on Staff of Domination or whatever it was, but this is terrible and unplayable. Absolute F. Up next is Surgical Skullbomb. Surgical Skullbomb is 1 mana for an artifact at common. Pay 1 sack. Draw a card. Pay 2 and a blue sack. Return target creature to its owner's hand. Draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery. Sorcery speed bounce is not what I'm excited to play, but when it draws me a card, cool. When it only costs 1 mana to put in, cool enough. This is fine. This I probably like. Honestly, still maybe a little bit less than white. I can't tell you how much I like +2/+2 in flying. That ends games. This probably won't quite do that, but I'll spend a 6th through 8th pick in this. And I will probably put this in most blue decks I play. Whereas the green, red, black ones require probably specific decks or require me to have a spot available, I'll probably make a spot in every blue deck for this one. Up next is Sword of Forge and Frontier. Sword of Forge and Frontier is 3 mana for an artifact equipment at Mythic. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from red and green. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may replay those cards this turn. You may play an additional land this turn. This is fine. It's not quite like some of the swords. Some of the swords are just brokenly good. You know, the one that makes wolves, real good. The one that mills a massive amount, real good. This one, doing the red temporary draw 2 cards and letting you play an extra land, fine. The best part of this is honestly that it's 3 mana, 2 to equip, +2/+2. That's pretty good, and randomly just boning your opponent if they're red and or green, and especially if they're red and green, is great. So you'll pick this first pick. You'll put it in every single deck that you play. It's just not quite as good as other swords that we've seen. Up next is Tablet of Completion. Tablet of Completion is 2 mana for an artifact at rare. Tap, put an oil counter on it. Tap, add colorless. Activate only if Tablet of Completion has 2 or more oil counters on it. Pay 1, tap, draw a card. Activate only if Tablet of Completion has 5 or more oil counters on it. So 2 mana and it puts an oil counter on itself. And then next turn, we can put another oil counter on itself. So that's 2 full turns of doing literally nothing for 2 mana. At that point, we have a Manalith roughly about the time that we would have Manalith, except it only taps for colorless. So, nowhere near as good as a Manalith. And then it's going to be several more turns until we can finally start paying a very cheap cost to draw a card. This is going to be entirely format dependent, I think. If the format is in any way fast, there's no way that you can just pay 2 and put this card as one of your, 23-ish cards in your deck and not just get run over. If the format's a little bit slow, and you can take one of those turns off and then several turns later start getting value, this could be pretty decent. I'm just going to start out not picking it, however, and we'll see how the format shakes out. I suspect it's not going to be any good, but if it turns out that we can go a little bit slow, then it'll certainly go up in value just a bit. Up next is Zenith Chronicler. Zenith Chronicler is 2 mana for an artifact creature Phyrexian construct at rare. It's a 3/1. Whenever a player casts their first multicolored spell each turn, each other player draws a card. Very filler. It's essentially a vanilla 3/1 for 2. There's not that many multicolored spells. There's certainly no common ones. So your opponent's not going to just be casting them left and right. Odds are you might get to draw like a card or 2, perhaps. Also, it's symmetrical. So if you're playing any multicolored cards, you're giving your opponent free draws. This card just looks honestly bad. The symmetricalness of it also just makes me kind of not want to even play it. So I'm just going to give it an F. I'm not going to play it. All right, lands and we're done. Up first is the Autonomous Furnace. The Autonomous Furnace is a land sphere at common. The Autonomous Furnace enters the battlefield tapped. Tap to add a red. Pay 1 and a red, tap and sacrifice it to draw a card. There is 1 of each of these in the 5 colors. They are all exactly the same. The only difference is the color they produce and the color they cost for the effect. These all look pretty decent. Yes, they're a tapped land, but the fact that later in the game, when you don't need quite so many lands, they draw that card to keep the game going is pretty decent. I will probably play, honestly, as many of these as I can get, but I'm saying that because I expect you'll only be able to get your hands on probably 2 or 3. There's the chance the format is so fast that you actually can't play 2 or 3. Perhaps even playing 1 will be a detriment. But I'll start out playing 2 or 3 if I can get my hands on them. But really, I'm going to be picking these, late-ish in the 6th through 8th pick range. And once everybody's kind of settled into their colors, probably even getting the ones I want on the wheel if they're there. Up next is Blackcleave Cliffs. Blackcleave Cliffs is a rare land. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands, and it taps for black-red. These are the fast lands. We'll see some more of these in the set. Basically, if you are playing this color combination or if you are splashing one of the colors, you want to play these. Like most rare duels, you don't spend a super high pick on them, or at least not until, pack 2, pack 3, when there's not much else in the pack for you. Honestly, I think these types of cards actually just defy ratings. You're going to pick them up mid-pack if they're relevant to your deck. Don't spend real picks on them. Also, don't expect to get them super late either, because somebody can use this, whether they're also black-red or whether they're splashing one of those colors. Copperline Gorge, Dark Slick Shores. These are both exactly what I just talked about with Black Cleave Cliffs. The Dross Pit, the Fair Basilica, the Hunter Maze. These are exactly what I talked about with the Autonomous Furnace. All of these are the same ratings. They just depend on what colors you're in. Up next is Mirrex. Mirrex is Land Sphere at rare. Tap to add a colorless. Tap to add 1 mana of any color, but activate this only if Mirrex entered the battlefield this turn, so just one time. Pay 3 and tap, create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might. This land seems pretty good. Obviously, you're hurting your mana base ever so slightly by playing a colorless land, but kind of like Crumbling Vestige from Battle of Zendikar, you get that one turn of it actually having a color, which is kind of cool. And then later in the game, when you've got mana to burn, make a 1/1. The unfortunate thing here is that 1/1 can't block. And because I'm still not sold on just how valuable mites are, I'm not sure how valuable this is going to be. This feels like something that you get to do when you're already really ahead. You know, you don't have to establish the board with a creature that can block because you're not being attacked and you're attacking your opponent. Cool. You can probably just play a creature that's better than a 1/1 mite, right? Still, I like the fact that there's just that flexibility and the ability to have a color for the first turn. I'm not going to pick this super highly. I'll pick it, I think, basically right around where I would have picked Crumbling Vestige, which is in the very low 4th, 5th pick range, maybe the very high 6th through 8th. We'll see how good mites are. I'm still not sold. Up next is the Monumental Facade. The Monumental Facade is a land sphere at rare. It enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it. Tap to add a colorless. Tap, remove an oil counter from it. Put an oil counter on target artifact or creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery. This is kind of cool for moving oil counters around. The issue is that this is a land. So this takes up, a land slot in your deck. Moving that oil counter costs you a mana because you're tapping this land. You don't get to use it for mana. And so I'm not actually sold that this is all that powerful. I'll include it into my decks where I am caring about oil counters, my blue-red, my red-green, maybe my blue-green. But I won't look to be doing this. The first purpose of this land is still going to be to tap for a mana for me. But having that flexibility of being able to virtually pay a mana to move an oil counter is going to be nice to have. So that said, I'm going to pick this relatively late in pack 1 just because I need to be in a deck that cares about oil to ever want to touch this. And I'll feel rewarded when I get it in pack 2 and pack 3 when I certainly am doing oily stuff. Up next is the Mycosynth Gardens. The Mycosynth Gardens is a land sphere at rare. Tap to add a colorless. Pay 1 and tap to add 1 mana of any color. Pay X and tap. The Mycosynth Gardens becomes a copy of target non-artifact creature you control with mana value X. Period. No until end of turn. This permanently changes into whatever you copy. It also loses all of this ability. This stuff doesn't stick around. It becomes a carbon copy. So this is a one-time use clone. Now, as we always talk about, I don't usually like clones that only copy your stuff. I really prefer to copy my opponent's stuff because that allows me to, stonewall them with something that they're attacking me with. But that said, this sidesteps the bad part of a clone because it's also just a land that taps for color. It filters your land, which is never the type of land that you want for your fixing, but it's an option. And I just like that flexibility of being able to copy. I will probably first pick this in some packs. I think realistically it's a second, third pick. I would pick a really good removal over this or a really good uncommon. And I'll play this in every deck. That said, I may not necessarily activate it in every game, but I'll play it in every deck. Up next, we have Razor Verge Thicket, which is a fast land, just like the ones we talked about. Sea Chrome Coast, also a fast land, like the ones that we talked about, which gives us up next the Seed Core. A land sphere at rare, tap to add a colorless. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast Phyrexian creature spells. Corrupted, tap, target 1/1 creature, gets +2/+1 until end of turn. So this looks like it's probably a secret black-white card, or perhaps a blue-white card. primarily because of the corrupted part of this, because you're going to have those mites running around, and those mites certainly look a lot more scary when they're 3/2s as opposed to 1/1s. Phyrexians are very evenly spread throughout the colors. There's certainly a lot more in black and green, actually. So this is one of those cards where if it ends up in your pool, you can take a look at your deck and see how many creatures this could help you cast with colors to determine whether or not you want to actually put it into your deck. I don't think this is a first pick at all. I think this is, again, a card that you're happy to see in Pack 2, Pack 3 when you are dense on Phyrexians or certainly going corrupted with mites. And beyond that, you kind of have to make your own decision when it's correct to play and when it's not. Again, a lot of lands tend to defy the pick grade, unfortunately. It's kind of a you'll know when you need it. The Surgical Bay is up next. We've talked about this. This is the last of the common spheres, which draws a card. I like them. And our final card for the whole set is Terramorphic Expanse. Terramorphic Expanse is a land at common. Tap, sack it, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. It's just Evolving Wilds. And it's always pretty dang fine. If you are splashing, you absolutely want to get your hands on these. If you're not splashing, I still play them because they still help you with those early hands where you have all one color and you need that second color. I typically take Terramorphic Expanse / Evolving Wilds around usually the low 4th, 5th, the high 6th through 8th pick range. You can sometimes get them on the wheel depending on just how much splashing is happening. But yeah, you should always play them and you should prioritize them if you do think you're going to be splashing or perhaps even going a third color. But I don't think that's a thing you should overly be doing. But that's going to wrap it up for All Will Be One. It's a set. It's a set. We'll see how it goes. This is going up on Tuesday, which means in 2 days, on Thursday, February 2nd, I will be streaming over at twitch.tv/themanaleak Phyrexia All Will Be One draft content. It'll be the early access event. Thank you very much to Watsy for the invite again. I'll be drafting a whole bunch and getting my first taste of how the format is. Unfortunately, in best of one, so it won't be a representative example of exactly how the best of 3 format's going to go. But we'll get to learn the cards and see how the cards work on the battlefield at the very least. Let me know anything you want to let me know in this set. Let me know what your pre-release plans are if you're excited for them. Definitely come check me out on Twitch. I usually stream on Wednesdays. I will be streaming this Wednesday potentially a Dominaria Remastered draft as well as a look at the physical board game Paperback Adventures, but I'll be playing the digital version because I got a code. So come check that out. It's always a super fun time in Twitch chat. In addition to that, you can go over to patreon.com/themanaleak if you want to help the channel out financially. There's some fine folks who have been doing that for a long time at this point, keeping the channel chugging along. Any amount is super duper appreciated. Make sure you click that thumbs up button, that subscribe button if you're not subscribed. Really helps me out. And otherwise, I'll see you all next time.